Tales of Destiny is the second Tales game ever made developed by Wolf Team. Tales of Fantasia, its predecessor on SNES, had also been developed by Wolf Team. However, since some of its key members left the company during production, it was dissolved, with its leftovers moving on to establish Namco Tales Studio. The key members I mentioned, though, created Tri-Ace and developed a spiritual successor called Star Ocean. Never heard of it? I'm sure you know the rest is history. So yeah, going back to Namco, Destiny was basically the first Tales game created by a first-party studio. It was released on the PS1 only in Japan and North America in 1997 and 1998 respectively. A full remake on the PS2 was released on November of 2006, almost 10 years after the original version. Apparently though, that wasn't enough Tales of Destiny, so Namco created a third version called Director's Cut on January of 2008. Both versions of this remake sadly stayed in Japan, but thankfully, a fan translation has been created by a small team called Life Bottle Productions of the Director's Cut version. This is going to be a review of both the PS1 original we did get and the aforementioned remake. Regardless of the version you play, the story is exactly the same. The main character is Stan, a charismatic airhead from a small, peaceful village. Yeah, typical protagonist trope of this era of JRPGs. He dreams of becoming an adventurer, later revealing he actually wanted to become a knight. While working on a flying ship, an enemy force attacks it, forcing Stan to escape, but not without running into a magical sword called Dimlos, who speaks to him. Dimlos makes a pact with Stan so he can wield the sword, therefore becoming a Swordian. Eventually though, he joins a couple of thieves called Mary and Ruti, the latter also being a Swordian, but they get defeated and arrested by Leon Magnus, who works for the kingdom, who actually owns Dimlos. Eventually they get to work together by order of the king to find a huge, powerful artifact called the Eye of God. And well, you know the Tales games, the story goes on from there and ends up changing plot again and again and again until the very end. It's not a fantastic story by Kazuya Ishizuka, I'll admit, but it's alright. It keeps you hooked up and entertained all the time. Strong character development is there and really good, but you should know by now that's the primary objective of the Tales series, so it comes with the brand. Unfortunately, the original PS1 release experienced some censorship. Sprites were altered, names were changed, most of them for absolutely no reason, and dialogue was changed that was deemed offensive. The same team who did the fan translation of the remake also released a reforged version of the original, correcting most of the censorship, with the exception of two things. The names of some characters like Woodrow being Gar in the original localization. Why change the name? What's wrong with Woodrow? This was corrected for the Director's Cut fan translation on PS2 though, but the most important one, in my opinion, which was also left intact on the remake, was the Eye of God. In all versions, it's referred to as the Eye of Atamoni, which is a joke. Read Atamoni backwards and it spells Inomata, the last name of one of the many Tales artists, Mutsumi Inomata. The remake is fully voiced in Japanese, including the skits, and every time the artifact is mentioned, all actors are clearly saying Kami no Me, which literally means the Eye of God. If Life Bottle Productions were aiming to revert the censorship and name changing, why will they leave that intact? It makes them look like hypocrites if you ask me. Thankfully, that's the only thing I found they didn't uncensor. The rest of the script does feel quite faithful to the original Japanese one. All versions of this game are traditional styled, as in you'll visit several towns and dungeons all interconnected with a giant overworld. The big difference between the original and the remake is that the former had one that felt larger and its towns felt expanded. For some bizarre reason, all of that was shrunk in the remake. I'm guessing it's probably because Namco felt there was no need to make things so big, especially in a world map with random encounters, so I'm not exactly against this change. One I'm definitely in favor of is the balance in the encounter rate. Let me say this right off the bat. The original PS1 release is deeply, and I mean deeply affected by the high encounter rate. It isn't as high as other JRPGs, but still, it's extremely tiresome getting into battle again and again. There's another reason why it's so exhausting, which is the combat. We'll get to that later. In the remake, the encounter rate is normal, very rarely feeling high. The one thing I do resent, however, is the camera during the exploration in the overworld. It looks like low-budget, early 3D navigation with 3D models that look a bit silly, and the camera doing you absolutely zero favors. It's terrible, to be honest, and I never got used to it. Thankfully, all exploration inside anywhere else, be it a town or a dungeon, is excellent, with a fixed camera, despite the movement of your character being a bit stiff sometimes, with a hit detection box that's very precise, another problem the original also have. But other than that, inside exploration in any version, especially in the remake, feels natural. Of course, you'll find a swift collection of treasure chests, and no, inventory in the remake wasn't expanded or anything, it's still as restrictive as it is in the original, only letting you carry 15 of each item, particularly the healing items. Dead ends and puzzles are still present in the remake. However, solving them fluctuates smoothly here, since you don't have to deal with that many random encounters and tedious battles. That doesn't mean, however, that all puzzles are easy to solve. Some are hard, but others are nerve-wracking, making you go back and forth, backtracking again. Nothing comes close to the final dungeon though. Seriously, fuck the final dungeon. I won't show you footage of it to avoid spoilers, but it's extremely and unnecessarily long, up to the point of being frustrating to complete instead of fun. I highly suggest using a guide for it, since it gets absolutely ridiculous. Finally, you should know that some of the puzzles and dungeons are exclusive to the remake, but a few puzzles from the original, like the infamous music puzzle, are gone. Now, what about the exploration in towns? In both versions it is presented with various segments, but they all lead to houses, NPCs, and a variety of stores. You've got the classic items, weapons, and armor shops, which are self-explanatory, but you also have the food store and the lands store. Food here isn't like in most Tales games where you just cook something to temporarily buff your party. Here you have a bag that can carry a limited amount of already cooked dishes that you can either buy at the store or find in treasure chests. The more you advance in the game, the more space you'll have for more dishes. These dishes are activated during battle after certain conditions are met, like escaping or executing a specific combo, etc. But to use them, you need food points, which you can also find out there in the treasure chest or recover them at the food shops. So these dishes usually heal your party, especially after battle. I really like this food system, man. I wish it could have been the same in every damn Tales game out there. And the land system is also different. In this game you have an option in the menu called Re-Rise. It is used to literally forge new weapons, armor, and accessories, or basically just to upgrade them. Different types and amounts of lens are required, but also party levels, for some strange reason. Even if one of the characters is at the required level to allow for a weapon or armor upgrade, if at least another one is not, it won't let you. You know, I love this Re-Rise system, but that was honestly a stupid penalty. Either way, it's a super useful ability that will save you a lot of money, since this game is quite frugal with that. Also, Swordian characters like Stan or Ruti cannot upgrade their weapons with lens, since their weapons are unique and never changeable, and they have personalities. Instead, they'll gain points after leveling up. These points can be used to increase some passive skills in the menu, each one going by levels. I like that. It was made to compensate for the lack of re-rise for these characters. This re-rise ability also works for the accessories, but not to upgrade them, but to literally create them. Each character has 2 slots for these, by the way, so how you create them is by using lens, and can come with only one specific benefit, like immunity to poison or reduced elemental damage, and with only one passive stat, like increasing your defense or attack, etc. This re-rise system is an exclusive feature of the remake. It was not in the original PS1 version. Another reason why the latter is inferior. The graphics in this remake are stunning. With the exception of the mediocrity of the overworld, the rest looks excellent. Great use of colors, great dungeon design, great character models, especially their 2D sprites during battle. I don't have any flaws to point out other than the comparisons with other JRPGs of that era, which looked much better. probably because they had a higher budget. Nevertheless, I think it's one of the best looking Tales games of its generation. The graphics in the original PS1 version are also good looking, but I feel they look in low resolution for some reason, the backgrounds in particular. The 2D sprites are cute, as chibi as they were in Tales of Phantasia, but I don't really see any improvements whatsoever. This was the second Tales game and the graphics should have looked better, other than merely being identical to the ones in its predecessor, battle design and interface included. I'm not trashing them, I'm just saying that they look way too outdated for a 1997 PS1 game. The music, of course, is by Motoi Sakuraba, but also includes several themes from one Shinji Tamura, and as always, of course, half of the themes are memorable or simply okay at best, while the other half is the exact opposite. I did find a bunch of tracks that are worth listening to outside of the game, but not too many. There's really not much that stands out in the music department on either version, to be honest, but it still has some tunes that are either quite catchy or total bangers, like some of the battle themes. So now that I've mentioned the battle themes, let's talk about the battle system. It's entirely in 2D on both versions, but plays and feels very differently. In the original, it is extremely outdated, feeling very sluggish, disjointed and unresponsive as opposed to its remake. Stan is the only playable character and he is a bit fast though. I mean, if you do combine his attacks and artes correctly, it might even feel satisfactory to kill some enemies. But the combat in the remake is just so superior that it's hard to go back to the original and appreciate it. In both, you have up to 4 allies, but in the remake, you can control whoever you want. You can't switch during battle, of course, only in the menu outside of it. In both, you can only move in 4 directions, but in the remake, it includes an auto jump by executing regular attacks or artes, which are your skills. In fact, this aerial combat is one of the highlights of the remake, but it can be somewhat clunky and frustrating if you don't practice enough. Hell, even if you do, it still feels disorienting or restrictive. I don't think the developers knew quite yet how to make it work well enough to feel right. The rest is fine, with every character having regular attacks and combos depending on which direction you press on your D-pad when you attack. However, there's no TP or MP system here like there is in the original or even in other Tales games. You can use artes to your heart's content, but of course, there are some penalties. If you don't have enough CP, your character won't do shit. To have CP, you need to either fight regularly or guard till the bar fills up. It can even fill up more than its standard number if you do a critical or a flash guard. The flash guard is basically completely dodging an enemy attack or executing a simple counter attack. Easier said than done, as you may have guessed. I'm thinking most of you will just button mash your controller until you win, even if you include strategic decisions or movements, and most of the artes won't be executed right away like in other Tales games. There's like a second wait between a regular combo and the use of an arte most of the time that took me a while to get used to. Mystic artes are also here, and that's where the bar below your character's HP bar comes into play. Once it fills up, you can press L1 right after executing a normal arte to trigger it. Eventually, more bars will be unlocked in different colors, so you can use new and more powerful Mystic artes. It doesn't work all the time though, especially not if you don't have at least a couple of C points. I never understood why. Maybe I was doing something wrong, but I swear I pressed the L1 button or kept it pressed while doing an arte, and the Mystic arte just wouldn't trigger sometimes. But anyway, it's a great combat, and you eventually will get used to it too, but not 100% I believe. As you level up, your characters will learn more artes, and those can be turned on and off in the menus. As for the characters you'll use, you can equip up to 6 of them to your 4 directions on the D-pad and the right and left secondary triggers. I always equipped magic spells on those two. The game's challenging, and it has a couple of truly nasty spikes near the end. The final boss is complete and utter bullshit with an insta-kill spell for your whole party. It's absurd. There are difficulty settings here and no penalties for using easy mode. I beat this game on normal, miraculously, but I did use easy mode for grinding to save up time and healing items. There isn't that much difference between normal and easy though, let me tell you that. Overall, the combat is the highlight of the gameplay, and it isn't too tiresome as it was in the original. It's great, fast-paced, but still technical at the same time, with interesting penalties for the artists. The remake also includes a Leon's Side mode. At the beginning of the game, you can select between the regular Tales of Destiny, which is Stan's side, or the new one called Leon's Side. This one spoils the heck out of the first one, so even the game itself tells you to play it after completing the main story first. What's it about? Well, you play as Leon and experience the whole game again, but from his point of view. You will also play a bunch of parts with him alone, and he's not too hard to control, but since by the time you beat the main story you'll be so used to other characters, it'll take you a long while to get used to Leon. Unfortunately, I'm not sure I recommend this mode. Unless you're a die-hard fan of Leon, I believe it's entirely pointless, since 90% of the time Leon travels with Stan and the others. You'll just go through the exact same story and the exact same events. Occasionally, Leon will have unique skits or dialogue, but that's about it. The rest is exactly the same, and you can even control any other character you want to in battle, not just him. So I don't see the point unless you're up for an almost identical second playthrough just to see the differences. In conclusion, the original PS1 release in Japan and North America is one of the worst Tales games I've ever played. That, however, doesn't mean it's bad, as I still think it's a pretty decent retro game. It's just full of major flaws and outdated mechanics that half of my playthrough felt like a chore. I honestly rage quit on it. But if you don't care about the remake and want to play this version instead, I strongly recommend the Reforged hack, which also fixed several things about the original, not just the localization. I'll leave a link to all the differences in the description. But if you care about the remake, then absolutely by all means play that instead. You're experiencing the whole game, but now expanded with better gameplay, graphics, and especially combat. Neither version is a masterpiece or anything, but the remake does feel very polished and solid in most areas, as good as other praised Tales games like Abyss for example. Hell, I found it better than Symphonia. In other words, Director's Cut is a must-play if you're a Tales fan. It is, as they say nowadays, the definitive version of it to play.